Welcome to Travel Buddy, presented by Switchfly. In this podcast, we talk about all things travel, rewards, and loyalty. Let's get to it. Hello, Nowell, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Travel Buddy podcast. Today, we are recording just after Thanksgiving, and so lots of travel afoot. You're planning a new trip, which I'm excited to hear more details about. Trust you had a great week. But today, while you're planning this trip, you were talking about how AI is the next best way to plan an itinerary, because you can ask it all sorts of questions and get a very detailed itinerary based on whatever you're looking for. And so I'm curious, how are you using AI to plan a trip?
So it's interesting, right? You spend a lot of consumers, you spend a lot of time doing a lot of different searches, right? About places that they don't know anything about. And so our youngest son is going to spend the spring semester in Berlin going to college. And, my wife, of course, like, oh, let's go see him. Let's go do a trip. Um, all of a sudden you're like, okay, put together a 10-day trip, let's say, or a week or whatever, 2 weeks. Where do we go? How do you get there? What's the easiest way? We like flying direct. So, one of my first questions was on flying, let's say United, what are the direct destinations from Denver into Europe? Conveniently, United flies into London, Frankfurt, and Munich, right? So once you're in those places, now it becomes a question like, okay, let's say if I'm flying to Munich and I want to know, well, where do you go? Right. And part of it is the analysis that AI can do that is hard for you is, you want to go point A to point B. And I remember being in Peru and looking on a map, and I was looking at this little map and I was like, and we were driving. This should take like 3-4 hours. And this guy's like, no, that'll take 2 days. And you're like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, it's just switch black. It doesn't show you on the map, but it's switch back, switch back, switch back, switch back, switch back. And you're like, oh my, and it did take 2 days, right?
Oh,
And
no.
yeah. And the interesting thing is that, when you start looking at where should you go, there's beautiful pictures, but it doesn't actually take into account, if I want to start in Munich and then, let's say only the maximum time you want to spend on a train is 4 hours, right? So you can actually go to the AI tool and say, I need a 10-day trip flying into Munich. I want to not be on a train every day. And the maximum time that I want to spend on a train is 4 hours, right? And it plots a course for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting because you can then dive into, and it prompts you for, would you like more information on the weather? Would you like more information on hotels, right? Would you like more? And so the natural kind of thought processes you start going down, it starts answering questions for you. So in our case, it's like, Munich to Salzburg to Vienna, right? Or to Prague, like all these different places. But it was like you do 2 days and then another 2 days and another 2 days. And then you can basically say, replace this city with that city, and it recalculates the total time or the weather or the this or the that. The more I play with this stuff, it's just really cool to help you figure out where to go. The one thing it doesn't have is anything current, right?
Sure.
So if if something happened 3 months ago in Prague, right, and you don't want to go there for whatever reason, major smog alert or something, it would have no idea, right? It would just be like, no, go. It's always sunny. But as a tool, it's super, super powerful, right?
Yeah. Especially if you're going to a place where you don't know much about that region or that area, and you don't want to, get on, let's say, Google Maps and add stop to calculate the distance.
Correct.
We did that for a Italy trip that we were thinking about. Wanted to fly into Milan, do northern Italy, see a couple of cities, Venice, and maybe was that Cinque Terre, all that whole area. And it it plotted out the whole trip for us, like you're
Yeah.
saying, the whole itinerary, depending
Yeah.
on where we want to go, how many days we were there.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
it's
you,
also, well, I was going to say, it also
yeah,
plots cost, right? So
yes,
you
yeah,
can
yeah,
say, oh, I want to go to stay in Switzerland. Oh, well, be prepared to spend $500 a night. But you could also tell it that's too expensive and it might suggest other places to stay, right?
yeah. I love that. I love it because it changes the way that you think about I don't know, interacting with a place or thinking
Mm-hmm.
about a place or finding, discovering, exploring new maybe facets to a place that you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
otherwise think about. Like you're saying,
For
it's got the
sure.
suggestions. And funny enough, there was this article that came out on the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, said that Googling is for old people. And it was saying that most people now are on Perplexity or they're on Claude or
Mm-hmm.
they're on some of these other tools that
Yep.
this is how people find information now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if you have any tools that are like go-to for you, or do you notice any ways that you're thinking about how you're not Googling anymore? I think you mentioned that before we started recording. That you're
I
like, hey, I'm not even like Googling this stuff anymore.
I I'm a big believer in Claude just because I like the way it works.
Mm,
It seems to be easier for me than ChatGPT. And, it's like, it's pretty amazing the things that you can have it do and calculate values, right? So, I mean, you can literally go to it and say, um, build me a week-long itinerary in Germany for less than $5,000, and it'll
mm,
it'll build it out, right? Um, Draw me a map of this, and it gives you a really simple map, right, of these cities and where there's no map underneath it. It's just really basic stuff. But I do spend a lot of my time. Probably my first tool that I reference now is asking the question of Claude, right?
mm,
So we're doing a project with a new customer and it requires European licensing, some other stuff. It's very complex.
yeah.
And, I have 3 lawyers that are travel attorneys that we use, right? Plus I have this AI tool and it's weird because it helps me find an answer quick. And I have yet to find a situation where it's wrong and the lawyer's right. Right.
Interesting.
And so the thing is that no one person has all this stuff in their head, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a faster way to find and get information. I think just for anybody listening, the best analogy that I think I've started using with people is that a large language model is like a parrot, right?
Mm,
So a parrot can only repeat what it's heard,
mm,
right? Parrots don't invent new sentences necessarily. They don't come up with complex answers. They can't answer like, how are they feeling today? Unless they say, I'm great, right? And so when you look at using these tools, they're great at providing answers as long as it's on the web and it's factual and it's things that, are digestible by computer.
mhm,
When you get into things that aren't current, right? Or are current and not just history in the past. So
mhm.
let's say you're going to Germany and 3 months ago, um, there was a huge labor strike and now it's not someplace you should go. It's not going to know that, right? So even though you might plan, a tour or something that you're doing on it, and that might be great, it's it's kind of the first step. And then the next step is, okay, let's make sure there's no, um, Department of State issued like security things, or let's Google about the city, make sure there's no alerts because, we've been in places where there's minor strikes going on. And it's pretty scary, right? When people are throwing
Mhm.
rocks at your cars and they're burning tires and doing all kinds of stuff. That's not a fun place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I've always said with a lot of these AI tools, it really is garbage in, garbage out. You've got to give it enough context for it to do
For
its
sure.
thing and work through the kind of questions that you're thinking about. But I think you're really limited by your imagination. Truly,
Mm,
I think like in the context of travel, thinking like, okay, I can plan out this itinerary, but then it's like, well, help me look at like some recipes or some things that I should
yeah.
be eating while I'm there. Or I
Yeah.
mean, like to your point, all these kind of like suggestions that you can get out of it. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. The thing I don't like about it, and this is not me going off the dark end or dark side, is that, a large language model has crawled, if you will, public domain information like websites, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're someone, take recipes as an example, who has put out like your best recipes on your website, but
Yeah.
you're making advertising dollars by having consumers come to it, or maybe you're also there able to sell your book, that revenue stream has been cut off for you, right?
Yeah.
I like to cook. We had 50 people at our house. I made a bunch of pork loins. I used Claude to help me assemble the recipes. It was
Yeah.
off on the time, but that's okay. Um, and you realize like the person that originally came up with that is nowhere to be found,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
there's a problem gap because I think Claude and these tools have figured out how to monetize their revenue.
Yeah.
But in the world that they captured all that data from, there is a revenue stream that's associated with those people, and it's being cut off, right?
Yeah.
And even Google crawled just a piece of it, and you click on the link and then you go there.
Yeah.
Google made the money from the clicks, right? For these other tools like Claude, you have to pay, like you have to be a paying subscriber to use them. So
Yeah, agreed. And obviously it's a massive topic, but yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
to the point of the recipe maker, yes, their revenue is shut off because of the advertising. If even that recipe that you're retrieving is one recipe from one individual person. Like I found my wife cooks a lot with them, and it's like, hey, I've got these. She'll tell it, I've got these 5 ingredients. Like, what should I make with that? And it'll give her a list, and all that sort of thing. And it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different recipes. But, yeah, it's a massive thing. I mean, even the article from Wall Street Journal, it said that it was saying by 2025, Google, their advertising revenue is, this is the estimated share of U.S. search advertising revenue going down to 48% for Google in 2025. And Amazon is actually the one that's climbing from 10 to 25% over the last 7 years or so. And so it's just like this massive shift in the way that we're interacting with information to begin with. Yeah, it's a massive thing.
Yeah. But I think with travel, like, it's going to change as well. I mean, we have large language models on our platform, all this other stuff, right? Helping make recommendations and all these other things. And I think that the consumer is just going to be more factual. Like you're going to be able to process information to go, oh, that's interesting, right? And it's kind of build your own adventure, right? So, hey, I want to go to Germany and I want to do a boat river tour and give me the top. What I was querying earlier today was, the top train trips in Europe, right? And it's like, oh, you could do this one in Switzerland, this one here, this one there. Tell me about that one. And it prompts you for like, would you like to go here? You can stay. You stay at this town that has no cars, right? You can do all this other stuff. And it's, for me as a user, it's faster, right? I'd have to pour through tons of pages to get these answers.
Yeah.
But it kind of gives you a quick starting point in the matter of minutes, right? That you can go, hey, interesting ideas. Now you sit down with your spouse and go, or whoever, your family, or you're going by yourself. This is the itinerary that I think I'm going to do.
Yeah.
What do we think? And including, you can then ask it and say things like, what's it going to cost for the train travel? And they'll say, if you're doing economy or, coach or business or first class or whatever, and break it down by route for you, right? Is it cheaper to go on the bus? How much would it be on the bus? Outline, give me the cost breakdown between bus, car rental, Uber, train, flying, and bike, right? And it can probably break down those costs for you. It's pretty cool because it's an efficient way to get to the root answer, which is how much is it going to cost me, right?
And also you can start to ask it. This is one of my favorite questions. What am I not thinking of? What's a question I should have asked that I didn't? And just to see, what kind of things that it sparked so much creativity for me, like I said, the imagination component. But back to what we were talking about with it kind of altering or displacing others' revenue who used to do this by hand. I'm curious your thoughts of like somebody, creating a recipe. Travel agents were the ones that would put these kind of itineraries together.
For sure.
What do you think about their role now in the next 10 years? How do you think about some of those things changing?
I think that what you're going to find is that travel agents are going to use the tool, right?
Well, sure.
I think you have people who want to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I need a 10-day trip in Germany in and out of Munich. Can you put something together for me?" Right? There are people like that, and they don't want to do the research into it.
Yeah.
A travel agent will put the whole thing together, including hotels, train tickets, everything. So you just boom and you're done, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the travel agents, though, will use a tool like an AI tool to help them figure out and solve the best route for them, especially if it's an area they don't know anything in, right? Or don't have the best knowledge. And so it helps them probably be a better travel agent than anything. Do I think it's going to put a bunch of travel agents out of work? I don't, because I think the age breakdowns between people who use travel agents today and, millennials, Gen X, like all these different groups, some people don't use travel agents, like someone else on the podcast here, right? Exactly.
How dare you use a travel agent?
Who never use a travel agent because you're doing all this research, right? When you get into complex fares, let's say you're taking a family of 15, you want to go on a cruise, you want to go to Alaska, you want to do all this other stuff. That's where travel agents come in super handy, especially when it's like, well, I got, 4 people coming from Pittsburgh, 3 people coming from Dallas, 2 people coming from whatever. They can take care of all of that, right? I need a hotel for 15 people. I need this, I need that, large group tours, all of those things. Those are all the complexities when it comes in. When it's just, your spouse and you, maybe a kid, hey, we're just going in and out of, we just went to Seattle for Thanksgiving, boom, back. Probably aren't going to use a travel agent for that. Doing a more complex trip is good. And I think the best ones are the ones who have been to the places, because they can tell you about places you may not think about, right? Like, hey, there's a 5-star hotel here, but it's crowded and obnoxious. If you go around the corner, there's one that's 4-star, but it's quieter and it's more romantic, right? And there's like value qualifiers that I think they add to the shopping equation.
Yeah. We have our second baby coming in June, and so our travel itineraries are going to get a lot more complex. And I made the mistake of not thinking about taxis in London when we were there in April, and how much that added up, getting private cars or where we needed to go to different things. Anyway,
correct.
So I should have used a travel agent, and I didn't because I'm dumb. But you get there.
You never know. And it's, I mean, and the thing is that people think that travel agents are more expensive. It's not necessarily true, right? Some of them, there's a booking fee or things for airlines and things, but they're there to serve you. And I'll tell you, the best thing about a travel agent, quite frankly, is when something happens, right? So if you're taking the trip to Germany and, something happens and you need someone's help, they're there to help you, right?
Yeah.
And so they're able to reroute, reschedule. I need a better hotel. My wife's sick. I need to do this, do that.
Yep.
It's super helpful in a lot of times to be able to do that with people.
Yep, totally agreed. That a robot cannot yet do for you. So
correct, and probably won't ever be able to. Right.
Amen.
So,
well, Noel, thank you. I now have a lot more of ideas and imagination for when I do my next trip, which is coming up in a few weeks. So
cool.
I'll need to ask more questions.
All right.
Well, we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Brandon.